In the freezing streets of New York, a poor mechanic discovers a young paralyzed girl lying helpless in the snow. What begins as a simple act of kindness soon turns into a life-changing journey, one that neither of them could ever forget. Years later, fate brings them together again. But this time, she's the one who changes his life forever. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. The city was quiet that evening, unusually quiet for New York during winter. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, blanketing the streets in white and muffling the distant hum of traffic. Streetlights flickered through the haze, casting long, dim shadows across the sidewalks. Jake, a 25-year-old mechanic with grease-stained hands and a worn leather jacket, was closing his small garage on the corner of 42nd Street. The shop had been busy that day, a stream of customers bringing in everything from dented fenders to broken engines. He had stayed late to finish a particularly stubborn repair, the chill of the winter night biting at his fingers and nose. As he locked the garage door, he noticed something on the edge of the sidewalk, a small figure lying in the snow, barely moving. Jake's heart leapt into his throat. He ran toward the figure, snow crunching under his boots. As he got closer, he saw that it was a girl, barely older than a teenager, who had fallen from her wheelchair. She was shivering uncontrollably, her thin coat providing little protection against the bitter cold. Her cheeks were red from the frost, and tears mixed with melting snow streaked down her face. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently, kneeling beside her. "I've got you." The girl's name was Emily, though Jake wouldn't know it until later. She couldn't speak clearly at first, just shaking her head and clutching her chest as the cold wind whipped around them. Jake carefully lifted her wheelchair, setting it aside, and cradled her in his arms, trying to shield her from the snow. He could feel her trembling, her body so fragile and small in his hands. Every instinct told him to get her somewhere warm, as fast as possible, but the streets were slick with ice, making the walk treacherous. He called a cab, waving down a driver with urgency, and helped Emily into the back seat, wrapping a thick scarf around her shoulders to provide extra warmth. As the cab drove through the snowy streets, Jake tried to calm Emily, speaking softly so she could focus on something other than the cold. "You're safe now. Just breathe," he said, keeping his voice steady, even as worry gnawed at him. Emily finally managed to mumble a quiet, "Thank you," her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. Jake smiled at her, a reassuring, warm expression that contrasted sharply with the frigid night. He could tell she was scared, not just from the fall, but from the world itself, a young girl trapped in a body that refused to cooperate, alone in a city that often felt indifferent to suffering. When they reached her apartment building, Jake carefully helped Emily out of the cab and into the lobby. The heat hit them immediately, a stark contrast to the icy wind outside. He guided her wheelchair through the doors, making sure she was seated comfortably. A woman in her early 30s, who turned out to be Emily's mother, rushed down the hallway, panic written across her face. "Emily!" she cried, hurrying over. She was tall and elegant, clearly someone used to control and order, but fear had made her movements frantic and unsteady. Jake gently explained what had happened, how he found Emily in the snow and brought her home safely. The mother's eyes widened, gratitude and relief mingling with tears. Emily watched silently, exhausted from the ordeal, but strangely comforted by the stranger who had helped her. She didn't know it yet, but this man, Jake, would become a constant presence in her life. He wasn't a doctor nor a therapist, but his kindness had reached her in a way that no professional could. That night, as Jake left her apartment, snow still falling lightly outside, he felt a strange sense of connection, a pull he couldn't explain. It was as if this single act of helping someone in need had changed something deep inside him too. The following days were filled with small gestures that gradually built trust. Jake would check in on Emily, bringing warm drinks, helping with repairs around her apartment, and sometimes just sitting quietly with her while she stared out the window at the snow-covered city. Emily's family had money, but they lacked the time and patience that Jake provided effortlessly. She began to look forward to his visits, finding comfort in his presence, feeling seen in a way she never had before. Slowly a bond formed, one born not of obligation or wealth, but of simple human compassion. One evening, after a particularly heavy snowfall, Jake helped Emily into her wheelchair and pushed her to the nearby park. The streets were silent, covered in a thick, sparkling layer of snow, and the city felt almost magical. Emily laughed softly as she tried to catch snowflakes on her tongue, the sound fragile but beautiful. Jake watched her, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the cold. He realized that moments like this, moments of genuine human connection, were rare and precious. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he wanted to be there for her in whatever way she needed. As the weeks passed, Emily regained a little more independence. With Jake's help, she learned to navigate her wheelchair better, gaining small victories that filled her with pride. Each fall, each struggle, was met with Jake's patience and encouragement. He never complained, never sought recognition. For him, it was enough to see her smile, to hear her laugh, to know that she felt safer in the world. The snowstorm that had seemed so dangerous and frightening became a memory of hope. The night that changed both of their lives forever, and though neither of them realized it at the time, that single evening, Jake finding Emily fallen in the snow, was the start of a story that would span years. A story of struggle, resilience, and ultimately transformation. Emily would go on to achieve things no one expected, but she would never forget the young mechanic who had simply cared, who had shown her that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could leave the deepest marks on a life. And Jake, the mechanic who had only intended to help a girl in need, would discover that by giving so freely, he had received something far greater than he could have imagined. A purpose, a friendship, and a bond that would last a lifetime. The weeks turned into months, and Emily's life slowly began to change. Though her body was still limited in movement, the world felt less intimidating with Jake by her side. He visited her apartment almost daily, bringing small tools and inventions he had crafted in his garage. Gadgets to make simple tasks easier. Devices to help her reach items, or even small mechanisms that allowed her to turn pages in books independently. At first, Emily had been hesitant to accept help from someone she barely knew, but Jake's gentle persistence and patience broke down the walls she had built around herself. With each visit, a new sense of trust grew between them, and Emily started to look forward to their interactions more than she had expected. Jake never treated Emily like a charity case. He didn't speak to her in a patronizing tone, nor did he make her feel like she owed him anything. He simply treated her like a person, a young woman full of intelligence, wit, and courage, trapped in a body that often betrayed her. Emily, who had grown up in a wealthy but emotionally distant household, was not used to this type of genuine attention. Her parents, though caring in their own way, were often preoccupied with work, social obligations, and the constant pressures of high society. Jake, a mechanic from a working-class background, had none of those distractions. His life was simpler, yet it was full of purpose, and Emily found herself drawn to his energy, his kindness, and the way he made her feel seen and heard. One chilly afternoon, Jake pushed Emily's wheelchair through the quiet streets of Manhattan, making their way toward a small cafe he liked to frequent. The cafe was warm, its interior filled with the aroma of roasted coffee beans and pastries. He had carefully measured out the distance so that Emily would not tire, making sure the path was accessible and safe. As they settled in, Emily sipped a cup of hot cocoa, her fingers wrapped around the warm mug. She glanced at Jake, noticing the subtle grease stains still clinging to his hands and jacket, a reminder of the hard work he did every day. Despite the differences in their worlds, in moments like this, they felt equal. Jake listened as Emily spoke about the things she missed most: walking through the park without assistance, taking long bus rides through the city, even the simple joy of feeling the wind on her face without the limitations of her chair. He nodded, never dismissing her frustrations, always offering encouragement. "We'll figure it out," he said one afternoon, his voice calm and determined. "There's always a way." And though the solutions were often small, incremental victories, Emily began to see that there really were ways to reclaim a sense of independence, if only in small doses. Meanwhile, Emily's mother watched these visits with a mixture of concern and gratitude. She worried about the closeness forming between her daughter and this young mechanic, fearing that the social gap between them was too great. Yet she could not deny the transformation she saw in Emily, the girl who had once been withdrawn, afraid to attempt even the simplest of tasks, was now laughing more often, experimenting with independence, and showing a spark of confidence that had been missing for years. Slowly, her mother realized that Jake's presence was something that could not be measured in money or status. It was the genuine care, patience, and attention he offered day after day. Over time, Jake began teaching Emily some practical skills as well. He showed her how to perform small repairs on her wheelchair, how to use adaptive tools to make life easier, and how to problem-solve when her environment posed challenges. Emily proved to be intelligent, determined, and surprisingly adept at these lessons. She learned quickly, sometimes surprising Jake with her ingenuity. For the first time in her life, she felt capable of controlling something in her own world, of influencing outcomes in ways she had never thought possible. These lessons became more than practical. They were a metaphor for her life. Each small success instilled hope, resilience, and a belief that her limitations did not define her entirely. One winter evening, Jake and Emily went for a longer ride through the city. The streets glistened under the glow of streetlights, reflecting off the freshly fallen snow. Emily laughed as the wheelchair wheels rolled over the icy sidewalks, a sound that warmed Jake's heart despite the bitter cold. They paused by a frozen fountain in a small park, the water sparkling beneath the ice, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. Emily looked at Jake and said softly, "I don't know how I would have done any of this without you." Jake shook his head, a modest smile on his face. "You've done all the hard work," he said. "I just helped you see that you could." Despite the progress, challenges remained. Emily's body was still frail, prone to sudden fatigue and pain. There were days when she would retreat into herself, frustrated and discouraged. Jake never pressured her, never pushed her beyond what she could handle. Instead, he adapted, offering small encouragements and strategies to cope with each setback. He learned to read her moods, to recognize when she needed space and when she needed support. Their bond grew stronger in these moments of vulnerability, built not on pity, but on mutual respect and understanding. Over the years, their connection deepened further. Jake became not just a helper, but a companion, a friend, and eventually someone Emily could rely on in ways she had never imagined. They shared countless conversations about dreams, fears, and the possibilities of life beyond her limitations. Jake, too, found a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. Helping Emily was no longer just a moral obligation. It became a central purpose in his life. Her triumphs were his triumphs, her struggles, his struggles. The snowstorm that had brought them together felt like a distant memory, but the bond it created was permanent. And while Emily's family continued to provide financial support, it was Jake's presence that brought the most profound changes to her life. He was not interested in accolades or recognition. His reward was seeing Emily thrive, slowly reclaiming her independence and finding joy in a world that had once seemed so hostile. With each passing year, Emily grew more confident, more capable, and more determined to live life fully. Jake had shown her that limitations were not the end of possibilities, that courage and resilience could carve paths even in the harshest circumstances. By the time Emily was in her mid-20s, she had transformed significantly. No longer the frightened girl who had fallen in the snow, she was now a young woman with a spark of determination in her eyes. And through it all, Jake remained by her side, patient, unwavering, and kind. Their relationship had become a testament to the power of human connection, to the impact one person's kindness could have on another's life. It was more than mentorship or friendship. It was a partnership built on respect, trust, and a shared understanding of what it meant to overcome adversity together. By the time Emily turned 28, her life had transformed completely. The girl who had once shivered in the snow, frightened and fragile, was now a confident, independent young woman. Through years of perseverance, therapy, and Jake's unwavering support, she had gained not only physical strength, but a sense of purpose. She had become an advocate for people with disabilities, speaking at events, volunteering, and using her influence to help improve accessibility in public spaces across New York City. Her experiences had given her a unique perspective, and she was determined to ensure that others wouldn't feel the helplessness she once had. Yet amidst all her accomplishments, there remained one person she could never forget, the young mechanic who had found her that snowy evening and refused to leave her side. Jake, meanwhile, had continued his life as a hard-working mechanic, running his small garage on the corner of 42nd Street. The business had its ups and downs, but he was proud of what he had built through sheer dedication and skill. He often worked late into the night, repairing engines and crafting innovative tools for his clients. Despite his success, there was always a part of him that wondered if he had made a lasting difference in anyone's life beyond Emily. Little did he know that she had been quietly watching his journey, admiring not just his skills, but his character, his humility, integrity, and the warmth he brought to everyone around him. One afternoon, Emily decided it was time to repay the man who had given her so much. She visited Jake's garage, dressed casually but confidently, and watched him work for a moment. The smell of oil and metal surrounded her, the familiar rhythm of his movements comforting and reassuring. When Jake looked up and saw her, a warm smile spread across his face. "Emily, what a surprise," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. She returned his smile, but there was a seriousness in her eyes he hadn't seen before. "Jake, I need to show you something," she said, stepping closer. Emily explained that she had been working on a project to fund initiatives for people with disabilities, and that part of it involved supporting individuals who had devoted themselves to helping others. "You've done more for me than anyone else ever has," she said. "I want to help you the same way you helped me." Jake shook his head, overwhelmed and hesitant. "Emily, I don't need," he started, but she interrupted gently, placing a hand on his arm. "No, Jake, you've given me everything: courage, independence, hope. Now it's my turn." With her support, Jake's modest garage transformed into a state-of-the-art workshop. New tools, equipment, and technology were installed, allowing him to expand his services and reach more clients. The humble space that had once been just a small corner shop became a thriving business hub, attracting attention from the local community and even beyond. Jake could hardly believe it. The man who had simply helped a girl in need was now being given the opportunity to grow and succeed in ways he had never imagined. But more than the equipment or the business expansion, it was Emily's recognition and trust that touched him the most. The two spent hours walking through the renovated workshop, Jake explaining his plans for future projects, Emily listening and offering ideas. Their partnership had evolved into something deeper than mentorship or friendship. It was a collaboration of trust, respect, and shared vision. Jake realized that the bond they had formed years ago, beginning with that snowy night, had come full circle. The girl he had helped was now standing as a pillar of strength beside him, changing his life just as he had changed hers. As the days passed, their relationship continued to flourish. Emily encouraged Jake to pursue innovations he had always dreamed about, from designing custom adaptive devices for people with disabilities to teaching technical skills to young aspiring mechanics in the community. Jake, who had once believed his life would always be limited to the confines of his small garage, found a newfound sense of purpose. Together, they began running workshops, offering internships, and mentoring youth who were often overlooked or underestimated. The impact they made rippled across the city, touching lives in ways neither had anticipated. Beyond the professional success, there was a personal transformation as well. Jake saw Emily not as someone in need, but as an equal partner, a brilliant and compassionate individual capable of making the world better. Emily, in turn, saw Jake's strength, resilience, and unwavering moral compass as inspiration. Their connection, forged in adversity, had grown into a relationship built on mutual admiration and shared experiences. The simple act of kindness that had brought them together had evolved into a lifelong bond, one that neither distance, circumstance, nor time could break. One chilly evening, as snow began to fall again over the city streets, Jake and Emily walked together, recalling the night they first met. The memory of that moment, the fear, the cold, the helplessness, felt distant yet vivid, like a chapter of their lives that had defined everything that came after. Emily looked at Jake, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "I never could have imagined my life without you," she said softly. Jake smiled, feeling the same warmth he had felt years ago when he first helped her. "And I never imagined mine would be this full," he replied. Through the years, they continued to support each other, facing challenges together and celebrating victories, both big and small. Emily's advocacy work grew, touching the lives of thousands, while Jake's workshop became a beacon of hope for aspiring mechanics and people seeking assistance with adaptive devices. Their story became a symbol of resilience, kindness, and the extraordinary power of human connection. It was a reminder that one moment of compassion can create ripples that shape the course of a lifetime, changing not just the person receiving help, but the person giving it as well. Eventually, Emily and Jake realized that their bond had transcended friendship. It was built on trust, admiration, and a shared understanding of life's fragility and strength. Their journey, from that snowy evening to the thriving present, had taught them both that true impact comes not from wealth, status, or recognition, but from the willingness to care deeply for another human being. And in that care, they had discovered not just purpose, but a shared joy that neither had expected, a joy that would guide them for the rest of their lives. In the end, what began as a simple act, Jake lifting a young girl from the snow, blossomed into something far greater. Emily, once dependent and fearful, had grown into a confident, powerful advocate, and Jake, the humble mechanic, had found success, fulfillment, and a partner who would stand beside him through every challenge. Together, they had rewritten their destinies, proving that even in the harshest winters, warmth, hope, and human kindness could prevail. From snow-covered streets to the heights of personal triumph, their story stood as a testament to the transformative power of love, gratitude, and unwavering support.